Um, I would love to hear from Shannon in terms of some examples of how people can be moved by digital communications. So we're talking about moving people to potentially help us end this pandemic, but can you talk about any examples of when communications have spread quickly, and how you have investigated that, and how you would normally monitor it?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And if Emily just wants to switch over to the next slide. Yeah, so that's a great question. I do have an example, one you're probably not really expecting, given it's a Sharpie. But it's an example from the November 2020 presidential election. On election day and afterwards, the kinds of misinformation that researchers like me and Jimmy were monitoring, me, Jimmy, Katie, were monitoring online. The situations that we were seeing floating around were largely related to vote counting and tabulation. There were plenty of rumors and viral videos and tweets suggesting that ballots were being dumped or deliberately invalidated. While many of these rumors were untrue and intended to sow doubt in the integrity of the election, um, the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA, dubbed this the most secure election in American history. So there was one instance of misinformation that translated to offline action that I kind of wanted to go into, and it's called Sharpiegate. It happened in Arizona's Maricopa County. It started with a viral video posted on Facebook. This video, which I'll be able to show you guys, purports an unsubstantiated narrative that poll workers were given felt tip Sharpie pens to voters. Voters were given those pens in conservative precincts in order to invalidate their ballots. So I thought that maybe I could show the video to you guys.
Sure, let's see it.
So explain one more time.
So the people that were in front of me, there were two people in front of me that used the Sharpie.
Yes.
That was given to them by the poll worker.
Yes.
It did not read their ballot.
Okay.
And they slid it in there twice. I used the pen.
Yep.
Took their Sharpie and threw it away.
And it read your ballot.
And it read my ballot.
And it read your ballot.
And it read my
so
ballot.
what they're doing is they're telling people to use the Sharpies. That way,
yes,
those votes aren't counted.
Yes.
That's exactly what's happening.
Yes.
So there was other people that were in there voting with their pens, and they literally went around and they were yanking pens out of their hands.
Yes, they tried to do.
Right. So for the record, these claims are untrue. Arizona election officials confirm that there are processes in place to ensure the ballots are counted, regardless of what kind of writing implement is used to fill them out. But the narrative did catch like wildfire on social media platforms over the course of election day, the next morning as well. The video was reposted by numerous accounts and then appeared on YouTube, Twitter, TikTok, Parler, and Reddit. So after West Coast polls closed and it became apparent that certain swing states, particularly Arizona, were closer than polls had predicted, the controversy about Sharpies was kind of offered as an explanation and kind of gained steam. So the misinformation actually received hundreds of thousands of interactions on Twitter and in local Facebook groups. The misinformation was also laundered by news outlets, verified users with huge exponential reach, and also interested political actors in order to sow doubt in the integrity of the vote, just to hypothesize and just kind of put it out there and sow doubt. So if you could go a couple of slides forward, that's an example of how it kind of spread in Facebook groups. There were a lot of posts like this that I was monitoring, and a lot of disinformation researchers were monitoring. And then the next slide. So Maricopa County's election department repeatedly debunked the theory. They tried to get the word out, but the damage had kind of already been done. Fact checks never travel as far as disinformation does. It's just not as engaging, so it's not necessarily rewarded by the algorithm. Also, I don't know many people who follow the elections departments in their local precincts, but after Sharpiegate kind of gained traction, it ultimately led to offline action in the form of protests outside of a counting center. If you could go to the next slide. So it drew hundreds of protesters outside of the recorder's office of Arizona's Maricopa County. You'll see Alex Jones there. He runs InfoWars. So a false, inaccurate rumor created this and sowed a lot of doubt in the integrity of the election. So, I mean, thanks to social media, like we all have real-time information a lot faster. That information travels farther and is injected into the public discourse instantaneously. However, that information doesn't necessarily get fact-checked. It isn't fact-checked as it reaches engagement and is distributed to millions and thousands of people. So to answer Justin's question about like how do disinformation researchers kind of track this information, we use a lot of different platforms, CrowdTangle being one of them, and this great new product that that D-Complex is putting out there to kind of monitor like what is the weather on Twitter, like in the information environment, as well as like what is the weather on CrowdTangle. Those are essentially like social media search tools so that I or a researcher can kind of see like what's happening in this particular Facebook group, what is trending, what posts are performing highly. And you're able to kind of identify like if I searched hashtag Sharpiegate, a lot of posts would come up kind of compounding this theory, laundering it, and you can kind of measure how many mentions on Facebook that it was mentioned. So.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for laying that out for us and giving us a real world example. There's actually a lot more real world examples out there. There was a situation in Watsonville where a flyer circulated and the town shut down for a couple of days during the George Floyd protests. And so Shannon mentioned that the information spread in a way that drove an action in the real world.